Imagine a world where the battle is not fought on fields of war, but in the invisible realms of the mind. A future where weapons are no longer made of steel but of mental energy, where psychic forces clash for control over reality itself. Welcome to the psychic war of the future, a realm where the boundaries of human perception blur and the power of the mind becomes the final frontier. Written by the visionary Dion Fortune, a pioneer in esoteric arts and ceremonial magic, this book takes us to the heart of an invisible war, fought not with conventional weapons, but with the hidden power of psychic forces. In this conflict, magicians, occultists, and seers are the soldiers, and the battlefield is our very psyche, with the fate of the future resting in the hands of those who can master the energies that flow through the cosmos. With each word, Dion Fortune guides us through the shadows of the human mind, where forces of good and evil face off in a cosmic dance, seeking not only to control power, but to dominate our very reality. Who will emerge victorious in this invisible conflict? This is not just a book. It is a call to awaken, to understand the unseen forces surrounding us, and to prepare for a future of a war already being fought. Step now into the psychic war of the future, a tale that challenges the limits of consciousness, where the fate of the world is not decided in the trenches, but in the depths of the human soul. A warning from the inner planes. I do not write this work as a warning to skeptics, nor as a testimony for scholars who dissect the invisible with mental scalpels, never having felt a single vibration beyond their rational epidermis. I write, as I always have, for the few, those who know there is a war that makes no sound but screams within the human soul. A war without bullets, but with wounds deeper than those that bleed. This book is, therefore, a living document, a piece of spiritual strategy dictated partly by my inner masters and partly by my own direct observation of the times to come. What will happen in Europe, what is already brewing in the great capitals, will not be merely a confrontation of ideologies, but a collision of invisible forces, powers operating behind thrones, beyond flags, even above the conscious will of rulers. For years, the workers of the inner plane, the silent network of esoteric vigilance over this world, have observed the rise of a new form of black magic, one that no longer depends on medieval spells or grimoires' invocations, but on radio waves, mass printing presses, and speeches that sweep millions along without thinking. What once was sorcery is today called propaganda. What was once invoked in dark temples is now broadcast through loudspeakers. These new weapons of war are not launched against bodies, but against minds. They are sigils disguised as emblems, enchantments hidden in nationalist speeches, collective spells that awaken archetypes sleeping in the unconscious of the masses. The ceremonial magic of the past has mutated, and its new ministers no longer wear robes, but grey uniforms and black ties. Many believe the danger lies in bombs, and certainly it does. But the most terrible is what precedes the physical explosion, the contagion of fear, the planned hatred, the directed use of dense emotions to weaken the collective aura of nations. In my research on psychic self-defense, I barely scratched the surface of this phenomenon. Today, I understand that what seemed like a collection of isolated attacks is in reality part of a greater weave, an etheric battlefield fought parallel to every visible confrontation. It is no coincidence that the rise of mass media coincides with a growing loss of individual will. That where complex rituals were once needed to possess a soul, now a press campaign suffices. The great sorcerers of this century do not work in hidden laboratories, but in ministerial offices and editorial rooms. But do not think this ground belongs only to them. There also exist those who work from the light, beings, some incarnated, others not, who sustain the planet's psychic balance. Their work is invisible, unannounced in newspapers, unadorned with medals. But when the soul of a nation is protected from a fall, or when a leader changes course by sudden inspiration, they are there. I write this book for all who feel something invisible pressing on their chest when they hear speeches of hate, For those who hear symbols they do not understand but recognize as threats. For those who have felt the world grow strange, not in its climate but in its vibration. The psychic war of the future will not be a possibility. It will be an inevitable reality, but it will not be invincible. To you who read these words, perhaps you are one of the called. Perhaps this book has come into your hands not by chance, but because you are already immersed in this war without knowing it. And if so, allow me to be your companion in arms. I will show you the battlefield. I will point out the enemies without faces, and together we will enter the inner temple, not to flee, but to resist. Because the spirit, when awake, cannot be defeated, when thought is the sword. By Dion Fortune. We have noticed that over 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to keep creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The Rising Shadow, the New Face of Black Magic. About how the black magician of the 20th century no longer summons in catacombs, but drafts political manifestos and writes editorials. The image of the black magician with his tattered robe, ancient grimoire, and a circle drawn on the stone floor of a crypt no longer serves to understand the true threat of our days. That figure, as feared as ridiculed, was useful in other times. Its archetypal symbol remains, yes, but its method has mutated. In the 20th century, black magic has abandoned archaic ritual and adopted the language of the masses, the power of symbols transmitted on paper, through radio waves, and in carefully rehearsed political gestures. I must say this clearly. The modern black magician needs no altar because he has turned the collective consciousness into his sanctuary. He needs no dagger to consecrate because he has sharpened the words repeated by an entire nation. He needs no animal blood because he draws vital force from the fear generated in millions of human hearts that sleep while awake. These new practitioners of the shadow do not recognize themselves as such. Many have never opened a grimoire or consciously drawn a single sigil. Yet they are possessed by invisible forces that operate with intelligence of their own. The ancient powers that once manifested in dark rites have found a new form of incarnation, the distorted political archetype. For centuries, the Orders of Light have known that archetypes are not human inventions. They are living entities, eternal patterns that shape reality, and, when invoked with sufficient emotional force, manifest. Divine wisdom, justice, freedom, all are archetypes. But so too are revenge, absolute purity, racialized nationalism, control disguised as order. The black magician of the present, knowingly or unknowingly, works with these latter ones. He allies with them by repeating their formulas, embodying their gestures, exalting their hidden names, fatherland, race, purity, blood. Pronounced with enough fervor, these names awaken powers sleeping in the astral planes, and once activated, those forces no longer obey their summoners, they possess them. Here is where the true psychic war begins. It is no longer a matter of protecting oneself from individual spells or personal curses. The new battle is for the collective soul of entire peoples. When an entire nation vibrates at the frequency of fear or justified hatred, when millions of people think in the same direction without knowing why, we are no longer facing a sociological phenomenon. We are facing a mass possession. The ancients knew that demons could be summoned. We know they can be constructed. The modern black magician has learned by his own inspiration or by whisper of invisible entities to create mental forms so powerful that they end up ruling those who generated them. These forms, fed by collective thought, become egregores, autonomous entities that, although born of the human mind, acquire their own will, direction, and agenda. Once formed, they seek preservation and expansion, taking possession of leaders, infecting movements, and deforming legitimate causes until they become subtle monsters. I have observed in certain governments, in carefully written speeches, the repeated use of words that act as source words, emotionally charged combinations that open the subconscious and allow deeper suggestions to enter. Such words are not arbitrary. They are magical keys. The black magician of the 20th century has learned to use rhetoric like a ceremonial magician uses his wand to direct the will of others without their noticing. And he is not alone. Around him operates an invisible network of conscious and unconscious collaborators. In newsrooms, official offices, and ideological training academies, the new sorcerers are trained. They do not study occultism, but they practice magic. And they do so with an efficacy that the ancients could never have dreamed of. Black magic is no longer hidden. It has become public, it has democratized. It is in printed symbols, in songs chanted by crowds, in uniforms marching to the beat of Mars's drum. And that is why the adept of the light cannot remain indifferent. Meditating is not enough. Protecting one's own aura is not enough. One must understand the movements of the shadow in order to counter them. Psychic war does not wait for the initiate. It reaches him, envelops him, tests him. Therefore, this first chapter is a warning. The enemy has changed faces. He no longer hides. He watches us from the podiums, from the covers, from the slogans. And if we want to protect what still shines, we must first see what has darkened. Chapter 2. The collective mind as an instrument of iron. The unconscious of the masses as a field of manipulation. Egregores. Suggestion and the art of implanting ideas without words. One of the most closely guarded secrets of esoteric orders has always been the existence of the collective mind, that vast and fluctuating psychic network that connects individuals in a common current of thought, emotion, and archetype. Whoever has not felt this mind lives like a particle, unaware that they are part of a tide. But the true occultist knows that this tide can be directed, and worse, it can be directed against itself. For centuries, the ancient sages strove to elevate the collective mind of their peoples. They did so with myths, rituals, sun-oriented temples, and festivities tied to astral cycles. They knew that when a human group shares sacred symbols, rites, and language, it begins to vibrate as a single being. And this being, called the group soul, can ascend or be dragged down. What the sages sought to build with patience and reverence, the new magicians of the shadow have learned to exploit with terrifying speed. They do not wish to elevate the collective mind, but to colonize it. They do not seek to inspire its awakening, but to parasitize its emotional energy. The human mass, when deprived of independent thought, does not become a collection of sleeping individuals. It becomes a hypersensitive, impulsive, suggestible organism. The collective unconscious is fertile ground for the sowing of entities, and these entities do not need bodies. They only need ideas. Here enters one of the most dangerous and at the same time most potent knowledges I have learned in my dealings with the inner masters, the creation and activation of egregores. An egregore is a collective mental form, a psychic condensation born of thoughts, emotions, and beliefs sustained by a group. It can arise from a nation, a religious cult, a political ideology, or even a commercial enterprise. What gives it form is not its truth, but its intensity. And here lies the danger. When an egregore grows large enough, it becomes autonomous. It no longer depends on its creators. It becomes a being of the astral plane with its own will, fed by the psychic energy of its followers. It begins to inspire thoughts, generate dreams, and sway decisions. All this without being seen, without being questioned, like a parasite disguised as protector. In times of war, the most common egregores are those of justified hatred. They dress in the robes of justice, vengeance, redemption. They take the form of collective enemies, demonized figures, totalizing ideologies, and every inflamed speech, every propaganda image, every public act of adherence or rejection feeds its astral body. I have seen, in internal work done during times of great national tension, how these entities float over entire cities like dark clouds, oppressing consciousness, distorting perception, exacerbating emotions, and the men and women who live under them act not as people, but as tentacles of a single invisible body. Thus the collective mind becomes a battlefield, and those who know how to manipulate it possess a weapon no physical army can match. There are techniques already employed in certain circles of power to implant ideas into the collective mind without explanation or argument. The art of subliminal suggestion, which in my time is barely beginning to be glimpsed, will in the future be an entire field of domination. It consists of introducing symbols, sounds, rhythms and phrases that penetrate the conscious defenses of the individual and lodge directly in the unconscious. There they become impulses, automatic beliefs, unquestioned truths. Magicians do not need to bewitch each person, they only need to claim the common field. If they change the color of the collective sea, each individual drop will carry the tint. That is why the occultists of light must not remain on the sidelines of social movements. It is not about political intervention, but energetic intervention. We must learn to detect when a collective emotion is being manipulated, when an idea has been sown with non-human intent, when an egregore is growing dangerously. And more importantly, we must learn to purify the collective mind. This work is not done with banners or speeches, but in the silence of the inner temple, in the sustained focus of elevated thought, in the conscious construction of egregores of light, archetypes that elevate instead of devouring. I remember a particularly intense night when, during a meditation with the Society of the Inner Light, we visualized a golden sphere enveloping the City of London. For weeks that image was sustained every night. The result was not immediate, but it was real. Certain plans for mass emotional manipulation failed, not because they were discovered, but because the general vibration became clearer. Thus one fights in the psychic war, not always by stopping the enemy, but by changing the terrain where it wishes to act. When the collective unconscious becomes lucid, the egregore finds no place to anchor. When the group soul awakens, the black magician loses his prey. Therefore, reader, if you feel the world becoming unreal, if the ideas are not yours, if your emotion seems to push you beyond yourself, stop. Observe, reaffirm your will, purify your mind. You are not alone. The invisible war is also won by invisible watchers. Chapter 3. The vibration of fear, the food of parasitic entities. Description of astral beings that feed on human emotions. How fear is artificially cultivated as energy. In all my years of occult work, both in the visible and invisible planes, I have come to the inevitable conclusion that fear is not simply a human emotion. It is an energetic vibration that can be harvested. Just as wheat is sown, watered, and reaped by the farmer, fear is induced, cultivated, and extracted by certain non-physical entities operating from the dense planes of the lower astral. This statement is neither allegorical nor mystical in a vague sense, but literal. These entities exist. I have felt them in failed rituals. I have seen them in inner visions. I have fought them when they infiltrated dreams and the vibrational fields of vulnerable people. They are not demons in the childish sense of the word. They are astral life forms that operate as energy parasites, feeding on dense human emotions. Panic, hatred, despair, anxiety, guilt, but above all, fear. Fear is one of the few emotions capable of violently and immediately opening the aura. At that moment, the vital field weakens, the will diminishes, and consciousness fragments. It is then that these entities penetrate, and they do not need possession in the traditional sense. It is enough for them to be near. Like bats of the subtle world, they absorb energy from the periphery. These vampiric entities have no power of their own. They survive only if they manage to establish a constant source of nourishment. For this reason, throughout the centuries, they have induced wars, religious persecutions, pandemics of collective hysteria, apocalyptic prophecies, and all kinds of illusions that generate prolonged emotional suffering. Not because they desire chaos as an end in itself, but because they need it to survive. In ancient times, their appearances were localized: haunted houses, fallen temples, particularly weak or malicious individuals. But in this 20th century, the spectrum has expanded thanks to the rise of mass communication. These entities now have access to the global collective mind, where before it took centuries to generate an atmosphere of sustained fear. Today, a well-directed crisis amplified by newspapers, radio, or even repeated public conversation with uncontrolled emotion is enough. Wars are not only fought on land or for political power, they start because these entities manage to activate collective emotional centers, generating a dense, sticky, low-vibration atmosphere favorable for their existence. Once established, it reproduces itself because fear generates more fear, and when humans vibrate at that frequency, they lose perspective, and with it, their freedom. I dare to say this clearly. Every media campaign that generates terror, every doctrine that exalts eternal punishment, every discourse that turns the other into a threat, is fertile ground for astral feeding. None of this happens by chance. Not everything visible has visible causes. Now, how do these entities act concretely? They have no bodies nor rational will, but they do possess magnetic instinct. They are attracted to focal points of sustained emotional pain, and once near, they induce thoughts that exacerbate that state. A person in constant anxiety will begin to imagine increasingly terrible possibilities, not because their mind decides so, but because an external force stimulates them to do so. That force does not think for them but amplifies their thought, like a distorting lens that enlarges all that is dark. These entities also associate with each other, forming true psychic hives that float over cities, battlefields, prisons, hospitals, or even schools. Where there is collective suffering, they are there. Where there is repression, systemic violence, institutionalized abuse, they prosper. They are the shadow of deformed human structures. And who then cultivates these vibrations on purpose? Here lies the most delicate point of this chapter. There are human beings, some conscious, others manipulated by these very entities, who have learned to artificially provoke fear as a form of power, charismatic leaders who install fear to then offer themselves as saviors, preachers who instill guilt to later sell redemption, organizations that manufacture threats to justify their control. They are, in many cases, unwitting partners of these entities. The economy of fear is real. The politics of fear is real. The magic of fear is even more powerful. These currents cannot be defeated with superficial optimism. It is not enough to think positively, as some proclaim. What is needed is vibrational lucidity, the capacity to detect energetic descent, to resist emotional dragging, to stay centered when the world vibrates in anxiety. That is why in our esoteric practices, we always insist on emotional control, aura purification, and firmness of will. These are not mere devotional practices. They are active defenses, armors, shields. The initiate who has awakened to this truth cannot be manipulated by these forces. They may feel fear, but they will not be devoured by it, because they will know that not everything they feel is theirs. And that discernment, that gnosis, is the first step toward liberation. Chapter 4. Symbols that kill esoteric language in propaganda. On the infiltration of magical symbols in advertising, flags, and uniforms. The emblem as an inverted talisman. Since the dawn of humanity, the symbol has been the bridge between worlds. Beyond language, beyond logic, the symbol speaks directly to the soul. It activates archetypal memories, awakens dormant pulses, and imprints commands onto the subconscious. In high magic, the symbol is a tool, a key and a door, but like any powerful tool, it can be used to build or to destroy. In the greater mysteries, we are taught that every emotionally charged emblem becomes a talisman. It does not matter whether it was drawn with conscious intent or not. If an image is repeated with sufficient emotional intensity, if it is revered, feared, or celebrated by the masses, it begins to radiate its own vibration. It becomes a point of astral condensation, an energetic seed with real effects. The ancient sages knew this. That is why they zealously guarded their sacred glyphos, their seals, their magical letters. That is why they hid them from the uninitiated, not out of elitism, but out of fear of misuse. Because when a symbol is manipulated without understanding, it can become an open gateway to chaos. Today, however, symbols have been freed from their temples and captured by propaganda. I have observed with growing concern how certain governments, ideological movements, and commercial forces have begun to employ symbols with occult knowledge. Knowledge they themselves may not fully grasp, but which is dangerously effective. Ancestral symbols, many ripped from mystical Eastern and Western traditions, have been reconfigured as emblems of political power, psychological control, and mass manipulation. Take the case of the inverted solar glyph, a symbol of spiritual power and regeneration in many ancient Aryan cultures, that has been transformed into an insignia of racial supremacy and systematic destruction. I will not mention its name here out of respect for the power it still holds. Suffice it to say, its inversion is no accident. When inverted, the symbol becomes its opposite. What was regeneration becomes corruption. What was cosmic order turns into infernal domination. This phenomenon is deeper than it seems. The symbol not only represents, it activates. And when millions march under the same sign, sing hymns around it, imprint it on their banners and minds, the symbol becomes a visual egregore, a magnetic center that drags wills into its vortex. Those who carry it often become, unknowingly, conduits of its vibration. This is not limited to politics. Modern advertising has begun to use magical symbols with surprising ease: circles, spirals, stylized crosses, closed geometric shapes, Kabbalistic numbers. All appear in ads, logos, labels, and although presented as design or aesthetics, they act like sigils, slipping into the subconscious and planting invisible commands. Who is behind this strategy? In some cases, designers and creatives influenced by popular occult books. In others, astral entities infiltrating the creative thought of those open through drugs, suggestion, or desperation to receive non-human inspiration, and above all a subtle current that drives the reproduction of symbols emptied of soul, but filled with parasitic power. The symbol, when separated from its original meaning and charged with collective negative emotion, becomes an inverted talisman. Its vibration, instead of uplifting, traps; instead of liberating, subjugates; instead of reminding the soul of its origin, it enslaves it to the dark archetype. That is why flags, uniforms, military standards, and even institutional colors must be examined with hidden attention. Because when an entire people swear allegiance to an emblem, they are handing over their life force to the entity that emblem represents. In our internal schools, we learn to consecrate such symbols. We know that a symbol drawn with intention, purified and empowered through ritual, can act as a bridge to higher planes. But we also know that if it is consecrated with dense emotions and unleashed on the world with ambition or desire for control, the same symbol can open a channel to the abyss. I have seen in inner work how certain national symbols emit dark pulses from the astral plane, not because the people who support them are evil, but because they have been infected by vibrations that do not belong to them. Yet no one questions them because they are everywhere, because they are normal, because they have been normalized as signs of belonging, without knowing they belong to something else. The true occultist, however, does not accept symbols without examining them, does not wear insignias without knowing their root, does not sing hymns without feeling the vibration of each word, because they know that in a psychic war the first enemy is the symbol one embraces without awareness. My purpose here is not to demonize every image. There are symbols of power, beauty, and deep truth. There are glyphs that awaken higher consciousness and open portals of light. But to use them, we must first break the spell of the others, those that kill, enslave, and sow fear with a smile. The current battle is not fought with swords, but with standards, and every visible emblem can be an open portal to the invisible. Chapter 5. The Astral Echo of Physical War. How physical battlefields open ethereal portals, the wandering souls, the unheard screams, and the psychic larvae born of collective pain. I have walked in vision across battlefields after the carnage, not with the feet of the physical body, but with the subtle body, the one every occultist learns to project and guide. What I saw there cannot be described with simple words, Because after the gunfire ceases and the cannons fall silent, the invisible begins to scream. Every physical war, every collective act of organized violence leaves an open wound in the astral plane. Those lands where blood was spilled not only hold memory in the earth, but retain vibration in the ethers saturated with suffering. The fear and anguish of thousands of souls who left their mortal shells unprepared, without comfort, without ritual, without farewell. The human soul, when violently torn from life, does not always find its way back to the higher planes. Often it becomes trapped in a dense fog, heavy with confusion, longing to return, resentment, and denial. These are the wandering weapons, fragments of consciousness that roam the battlefields, often unaware they have died. I have felt their presence. Some search for their bodies, others cling to the objects they carried, and still others obsessively replay the final moments of their lives, as if the act of dying were frozen in an eternal loop. These places become what the ancients called open thresholds, regions where the planes overlap and where the veil between the living and the dead dangerously thins. At these thresholds come other non-human forms. There, where pain has been concentrated forcefully and unresolved, arise what in esoteric language we call astral larvae. They are neither souls nor demons. They are psychic forms born of raw, accumulated suffering, undigested spiritually, like the energy of collective pain, unable to free itself, taking on its own shape. These larvae do not think, do not reason. They cling to anything that emits the same vibration that created them. I have seen these entities attach themselves to returning soldiers, field medics, nurses, even to the relatives of the fallen. They act as psychic drains, stealing vitality, causing nightmares, dark moods, sudden violent acts, or despair without apparent cause. All this, of course, occurs beyond the vision of traditional medicine, but not beyond the eye of the initiated. The trained occultist knows that every visible war leaves an invisible trail that takes generations to dissipate. The temples of antiquity understood this law. Therefore, where blood was spilled without ritual purpose, years later ceremonies of cleansing were performed, collective exorcisms, vibrational acts of reconciliation between worlds. Today, in our secularized civilization, we have forgotten this art. Cities are built over bones without offering peace. Statues rise over unheard screams, and the consequences soon manifest. When a place has been saturated with physical and emotional pain, it becomes an astral magnet for traumatic repetition experiences. That is why certain wars seem to repeat in the same territories, as if a memory of the conflict seeks to manifest again and again. It is not just history, it is dark magic left untransmuted. That is why monuments to the fallen, when sincere, hold deep esoteric value, not for their marble, but for the vibrational acknowledgement, the act of naming, remembering, channeling pain into a higher form. When this is not done, the energy remains unresolved, and the ethereal portals stay open, vulnerable to any intrusion. Who crosses these portals? Besides the wandering souls and larvae, there is another kind of being attracted by the vibrational echo of war. Intelligent astral entities, low-ranking but cunning, seeking to take possession of saturated places to establish energy control centers. From these centers, they manipulate thoughts, induce conflicts, and amplify tensions. It is no coincidence that in places where massacres have occurred, inexplicable crimes often repeat later. Physical war, then, does not end with the signing of a treaty. Its astral consequences continue to act as long as they are not addressed with knowledge and pure magical intent. What can be done? The adepts of light do not flee these fields, they work within them. Some, through sustained meditations, radiate light over the marked territories. Others, in nocturnal rituals, seal portals, release souls, and dissolve larvae with directed vibration. In our internal light fraternity, we have maintained specific rituals, of which I cannot give details, to transmute latent war energies. And I have seen more than once how the atmosphere of a place changes radically after these works. But it is urgent that more conscious workers participate. Passive prayer is not enough, Knowledge is necessary. Focus is necessary. Will is necessary, because the battlefields of the 20th century are expanding, and if we do not seal the doors that have opened, the pain of the past will leak into the present and project into the future. Chapter 6. The Servants of Darkness, Cults, Networks, and Invisible Pacts. The disposition of occult groups that use wartime confusion for purposes of spiritual control. In every era of crisis, transition, or war, not only do the visible powers of politics, economy, or weaponry act. In the shadows, hidden networks also mobilize, those that belong neither to any country nor flag, but to a supranational will, and even more so to a supraphysical will. In recent years, I have clearly begun to notice that certain occult groups who proclaim themselves initiates have chosen to serve another current, that of darkness disguised as order. It is necessary to speak clearly without yielding to fantasy or sensationalism, because these organizations do not present themselves as cults of evil or worshippers of chaos. They do not present themselves as custodians of knowledge or guardians of a spiritual elite destined to govern the world for the good of all. And within that carefully polished language, that facade of disciplined mysticism hides the germ of true evil, the control of human consciousness through hidden domination. These groups, some of which have existed for centuries, have understood that war periods are fertile ground to advance their agenda. Why? Because war weakens the will, breaks traditional moral systems, and leaves the masses unguided, hungry for meaning and easily influenced. In that state, the collective soul becomes fertile soil for all kinds of esoteric sowing. These servants of darkness do not always call themselves by that name. In fact, many sincerely believe they are working for order, evolution, and spiritual selection. But their methods betray them. Closed hierarchies, violent initiations, rituals that absorb the neophyte's will instead of expanding it, symbolic indoctrination without enlightenment, and above all, alliances with lower astral entities that demand obedience in exchange for psychic power. These invisible pacts exist, and although the forms may vary, the pattern is always the same. A secret cabal channels energies from dense planes, distributes them through rites to its members, and in return these entities feed on the emotional energy generated by their acts: fear, domination, exclusion, fanaticism. The oldest of these groups do not act in the name of nations, but in the name of a higher evolution they consider incompatible with individual spiritual freedom. For them, humanity must be herded like sheep, shaped by symbol, tamed by fear, and unified by obedience. They do not seek enlightenment. They seek the submission of souls under the guise of initiation. These groups have infiltrated legitimate esoteric orders, founded others with a brilliant facade, and extended their influence into political movements, military institutions, and even religious organizations. They are not interested in truth. They seek control of the collective vibration. During my internal work with the Society of the Inner Light, we have detected nerve points, strategic places where these groups perform their rites: ancient castles, underground chambers, institutional buildings loaded with inverted symbols. There they project mental forms that act as cores of astral radiation, designed to alter the thoughts of those nearby, weaken the will of those who work there, and interfere with the decisions of leaders. Invisible pacts are real. In some cases, they are pacts between humans and subtle entities. In others, between humans united by an esoteric ideology of psychic supremacy. Their seals are not seen in newspapers, but they mark the energetic field of the world. And the most dangerous thing about these groups is not their power, but their ability to disguise themselves. They dress in white, in gold, in elevated language. They speak of karma, divine hierarchies, planetary missions, but their actions reduce consciousness, they do not expand it. And where one feels the soul must bow, obey blindly, renounce its inner light for a higher truth that cannot be questioned, there lies the trap. The true initiate fears no authority, but neither idolizes it, They do not surrender their consciousness to any entity, however luminous it may seem, without subjecting it to the fire of inner discernment. These invisible cults cannot be fought with public denunciations. They would be useless. But they can be neutralized from the inner planes by sealing their centers, dissipating their egregores, awakening those hypnotized by their symbols, and most importantly, raising the collective vibration so their seeds do not germinate. The reader must understand that the subtlest evil is not the one that imposes, but the one that seduces, not the one that shouts, but the one that whispers. And in this 20th century, the battle is increasingly silent, symbolic, invisible, but also more decisive. Chapter 7, The Guardians of the Light, White Magic in Times of Chaos. How do the true initiatic orders operate in times of war? The silent work of sustaining the vibration of civilization. While the forces of darkness spread their networks disguised as order, and symbols are used to confuse rather than reveal, there still exist those who have not forgotten the silent oath, to guard the flame of consciousness even in the longest night. They are the guardians, not those who preach, but those who sustain, not those who proclaim their virtue, but those who radiate their light from silence. True initiatic orders do not operate amid turmoil. Their action is vibratory, ethereal, deeply psychic, and carefully veiled. Their members seek no worldly recognition. They know that in times of war, propaganda, and collective possession, the safest place to act is the inner temple. Yet from there, their work is real, effective, and powerful. What do the Guardians of the Light do during chaos? They do not flee, do not barricade themselves, do not isolate from the world's pain, but neither do they fall into agitation. Their task is to keep the planet's spiritual current aligned so that even when people stray, the inner compass is not completely destroyed. They operate as invisible pillars that support the roof of collective consciousness. And although their numbers are few, their impact is immense, because the soul of the world, like the individual soul, responds more to subtle impulses than to violent actions. I have worked with some of these groups in body or in vision and can testify. Their temples are necessarily physical. Many operate from the etheric plane with members in different countries, synchronized not by letters but by symbol. Their language is vibration. Their action is directed thought. Their weapon is conscious silence. The Guardians sustain key points on the astral plane, places where psychic conflict is most intense. They do not act as fighters, but as balancers. They enter deep meditation, anchor higher energies, dissolve lavas, redirect mental flows. Some work in hospitals, prisons, war zones, others from monastic cells, anonymous rooms, or lost caves. Many of them will never meet each other in the physical plane, but in the inner plane, they are part of a network that emits high-frequency pulses. That network, though invisible to most, is the true spiritual shield of humanity. And they do not only work with abstract energy, they also influence the inspiration of certain leaders, protect certain children, and create moments of collective lucidity that halt the worst. A peace treaty that seems to arise from nowhere, a sudden intuition that saves thousands of lives, an abrupt change in the course of a battle. All these can be indirect works of their influence. Their work, however, is not without danger. Operating on the subtle plane, they are natural targets of forces that seek to unbalance the global vibration. For this reason, their training must be rigorous, their aura strong, their discernment absolute. Not everyone who wishes to serve is prepared. To be a guardian is not an ego choice. It is a call of the soul, a response to a vibration that not all can sustain without breaking. And how do these guardians integrate into society? Often imperceptibly. They can be gardeners, teachers, doctors, secretaries. Their power is not in the position, but in consciousness. Wherever they walk, they readjust the energetic field of their surroundings, not with words, but with presence. They speak little, but when they do, their words resonate beyond hearing. They do not impose, but where they are, chaos becomes less dense. They do not announce themselves, but if one is attentive, they can be recognized. In our own fraternity of the inner light, we have worked in connection with some of these networks, and in critical moments, such as during bombings, we have felt how the vibration of these souls sustained the country's energetic field, even as visible structures collapsed. A nation that still has guardians is not lost, and you, reader, if you feel these words touch something deep within you, if you have vibrated alone with a call that does not come from this world, perhaps you are already one of them. You will not know it by titles or initiatic ranks. You will know it because the pain of the world does not destroy you, it activates you. Because in the face of hatred you do not shout, but you sustain. Because when all flee, you become still. In these times, more than ever, the guardians of the light must remember who they are, not to fight with fire, but to bring clarity. Not to oppose the world, but to save what still can bloom. Chapter 8. The Technique of Modern Psychic Attack. Beyond the evil eye, distant suggestion, thought pressure, dream manipulation, and directed vibratory fields. When I published Psychic Self-Defense, I warned that invisible attacks, though ignored by official science, are as real as physical pain, and sometimes even more persistent. Today, after years of observation, study, and prior battle, I must say that psychic attack techniques have evolved. What was once a rudimentary art of individual witchcraft has now become a vibratory science applied by individuals, groups, and even entire faceless structures. It is no longer the old evil eye or curse cast from a resentful glance. The new invisible offensive is not perceived in objects, but in the atmosphere. It is not launched with loud words, but with sustained, projected, and directed thoughts. It is a war without projectiles, but with defined targets. Let us begin with the first method, distant suggestion. Every sustained thought creates a mental form, but if that thought carries emotion, defined intention, and clear visualization, it acquires direction, penetration, and effect. The ancient magicians knew this, but now this technique has been refined even by those who do not identify as occultists. Charismatic leaders, soulless advertisers, manipulative ideologists. All, when they focus their will on vulnerable masses, are projecting their influence remotely. And when the target is not a crowd but a specific individual, it becomes an attack. Modern attacks no longer require dolls, pins, or black candle rituals. They require something more effective, focused obsession. A person who, out of envy, resentment, or desire for control, continuously thinks of another with negative intensity is radiating psychic pressure. And if the receiver has emotional cracks, guilt, fear, dependence, anguish, that radiation penetrates. I have handled cases where apparently healthy people began experiencing blockages, confusion, nightmares, and physical weakening without medical cause. By investigating the etheric field, we discovered a constant current of directed thought aimed at them like an invisible rope tied to the solar plexus or mental center. It is their thought expression, and although its effect is not immediate, it is constant and therefore more dangerous. The next method is dream manipulation. This technique is more advanced and usually requires some form of occult training, or, failing that, the action of entities from the lower astral plane collaborating with the attacker. It consists of influencing the target's dreams by inducing visions, messages, disturbing images, or even symbolic apparitions designed to emotionally condition the sleeper. Dream, as initiates know, is a state in which consciousness becomes highly suggestible. Rational barriers are suspended. The soul travels, and if not properly anchored, it can enter contaminated regions or be manipulated by external forces. There are groups that employ this technique for intimidation, emotional control, or psychic weakening. In some cases, they use distorted, inverted names, altered symbols, or familiar forms to disguise manipulation as spiritual guidance. It is a falsification of the prior method, but perhaps the most insidious and hardest to detect method is that of directed vibratory fields. In certain spaces, offices, institutions, government buildings, even some distorted temples, currents of artificially induced psychic energy are installed, created through collective mental concentration. Specific geometric design of the space, strategically placed symbols and repeated practices. These vibratory fields, though invisible, directly affect mental clarity, willpower, and emotional stability of those who remain within them. It is a poisoned atmosphere. I have entered buildings where one feels thoughts clouding, emotions disordering without reason. There are no ghosts or strange noises, but the etheric body reacts as if being drained. This is the sign that a hostile psychic field has been established. Some governments and corporations, without fully realizing it, have built over such places, and the results are palpable. Erratic decisions, increased internal violence, inexplicable chaos. In other cases, it is done on purpose. How to defend against these techniques? First, awareness. Knowing this exists already dissolves part of its power. The most effective attack is the one you do not believe is real. Second, psychic hygiene. Daily cleansing of the mental field through affirmation, silence, and visualization of light is not naive devotion. It is a strategic practice. Third, dream protection. Before sleeping, the adept must seal their aura, program their subconscious, and if possible, invoke their inner guide to guard the threshold of sleep. Fourth, emotional discernment. Not every dark thought that comes to you is yours. Not every fear is your own. Knowing how to differentiate the internal from the induced is part of the soul's mastery. In this modern era, where technology serves as a channel for invisible currents and human attention is currency, psychic attack has ceased to be an individual matter and has become a mass technique. But the possibility of defense has also grown, if one chooses to awaken. A trained will is stronger than any mental form, and a single luminous thought sustained with purity can undo weeks of astral pressure. Let fear not prevail, let clarity prevail. Because in the realm of spirit, vigilance is protection and consciousness the true armor. Chapter 9. Occultism in Diplomacy and Military Strategy. Real and covert cases where the esoteric has influenced military decisions. The magician as advisor to power. The modern world likes to present itself as rational, scientific, and detached from the superstitions of the past. But that facade quickly falls away when examining the inner structures of power. What is hidden is not only corruption but also magic. Yes, magic at the heart of politics. Magic in war strategies, magic behind decisions that to the eyes of the world appear as cold military operations, but have actually been designed or inspired by invisible forces. The initiate knows that every war has a hidden dimension. It always has. Ancient kings never launched campaigns without consulting astrologers, oracles, or trusted magicians. Great empires of the past planned their conquests, following geomantic lines, celestial configurations, and ritual synchronies. War was not just a fight for territory, it was a magical act. And today, although that truth has been buried beneath rationalist discourse, it remains alive in the chambers where the fate of nations is truly decided. During the years I have been in contact with inner circles, some openly occultist, others discreetly interested in the esoteric, I have received testimonies, confirmations, and revelations that allow me to state the following with certainty. Some of the most consequential military decisions of our era have been influenced directly or indirectly by magicians, seers, astrologers, and mediums. In some cases, these are visible advisors presented as symbolic consultants, experts in collective mindset, or cultural psychologists. In others, they operate anonymously, passing information through encrypted channels, internal documents, or carefully orchestrated meetings. It is known, for example, that certain generals consult planetary movements before ordering an attack, that some diplomats are trained in mental reading techniques, suggestion, and reading the adversary's vibratory field, that certain peace conferences are held on days carefully chosen for their astral alignment, not simply by protocol. One particularly revealing case was that of a national leader, whose name I withhold for prudence, who maintained 3 unofficial people in his inner circle, a numerologist, a symbologist, and a channeler. He did not make decisions without their vibratory consensus, and although publicly mocking esotericism, his entire government was permeated with magical symbols carefully designed to influence public perception, instill obedience and project power. Many of the uniforms, shields and flags we today associate with totalitarian regimes are not products of chance or mere aesthetics. They were constructed as true collective talismans charged with inverted sacred geometry, aggressive vibratory chromatics, and carefully calculated archetypal signs. Every line, every color, every shape is a formula designed to affect the unconscious of the masses and reinforce the egregor of domination. The most disturbing thing is that these strategies have been replicated by different sides. Magic in times of war has no moral loyalties, only obedience to those who understand and execute it. And in this century, the magician does not wear a robe or carry a staff. He sits behind a desk, drafts manifestos, designs shields, advises in secret. But his power is immense because he works with currents that shape reality before it manifests. Is this necessarily dark? No. There are also cases where the esoteric has been used to stop conflicts, soften consequences, and avoid catastrophes. I know the story of a small group of seers who, anticipating a large-scale attack, performed a ritual of silent intervention. The event was not entirely avoided, but its impact was radically less than expected. There were no visible heroes, only redirected vibrations. There are also hidden temples in European capitals where initiates work exclusively to sustain peace, and diplomats trained in emotional field reading, capable of perceiving the true intention behind a political smile. Modern war is not one only with bullets or mercenaries. It is one with inner perception, vibratory alignment, and magical precision. And for that reason, the initiate who knows these realities cannot remain ignorant of the hidden game played behind the visible game. They must learn to detect the signs, to read public symbols with the inner eye, to perceive when a speech has been energetically charged, when a decision responds to an esoteric agenda rather than a rational one. And more importantly, they must decide, will they be only a spectator, or will they also choose to become a conscious instrument of a higher, purer, and more just magic? Because if those who know the light do not intervene, those who operate from the shadow will continue to pull the strings. Chapter 10. The Battle for the Child's Psyche, the Future as a Target. How dark currents sow patterns from childhood, books, games, songs, and twisted teachings as spells in formation. Most people imagine war as a confrontation between adults, armies, strategies, and political decisions. Few understand that the true battle, the deepest, most decisive one, is fought in the child's soul, not in the body, not in formal education, but in the invisible fabric of their imagination, in the still virgin sensitivity of their subconscious mind, in the psychic structure that is forming, and which, unknowingly, will become the foundation of everything they will believe possible or impossible. The ancient initiates knew that the first 7 years of a human being's life are the most fertile and fragile field across all planes. What is sown there in the form of images, words, sounds, and gestures remains as an almost unchangeable vibratory code that will determine their relationship with the world, with authority, with beauty, with mystery, and with their own soul. The dark currents that operate with millimetric precision have understood this better than we have. That is why they have learned to stop attacking the wise, the leaders, the conscious adults. Now they aim directly at the children, not with bullets but with distorted symbols, not with screams but with songs, not with threats but with games, not with chains but with stories. I have carefully examined a series of materials, illustrated books, school songs, seemingly harmless toys, and found in them symbolic structures clearly designed to introduce vibrations of blind obedience, covert fear, sensitization to violence, and above all, soul separation. One might think it paranoia, but when observed with a trained eye, one discovers that these forms are not random. There is a pattern, a hidden language that distorts the archetypes. The hero is turned into a jester, the wise into a madman, the monster into an object of desire or a joke. The soul's journey is ridiculed, trivialized, and replaced by a narrative of external power, salvation from without, magic without consciousness. And more gravely, pain is normalized. The child, before learning to read, has already been exposed to thousands of images of destruction, savage competitiveness, abandonment, betrayal, public humiliation, and violence turned into spectacle. All this is recorded in their etheric field as patterns of acceptable reality. Thus, when grown and seeing these scenes repeat in their own life, they will not rebel against them. They will feel it is normal. That is sorcery. Sorcery applied on a massive scale, not through spells, but through vibratory programming, increasingly sophisticated. The innocent games that simulate war, exalt conquest, and teach eliminating the other to advance are not simple entertainments. They are repetitive rituals of psychic conditioning. Songs with catchy rhythms but dark lyrics, stories told in schools where duty is always obedience, where punishment is ritualized, and comparison between children becomes a measure of worth. All this is part of the same design, to mold the child's mind so that it never knows its true power. And if the child never discovers that they have a soul, that within them is a hidden temple, a divine spark, an axis of freedom, then the battle is already lost before it has begun. The orders of the light, aware of this urgency, work quietly but firmly, rebuilding the pure archetype in the child's soul through carefully crafted symbolic stories, images that restore beauty and cosmic order, simple exercises to remember the inner self. The true occultist does not only work with adults, they know the child's soul is the first and most powerful altar. That is why today, more than ever, parents, teachers, caregivers, and artists must become conscious masters, not showy magicians, but guardians of the symbol, creators of vibratory reality. Because every word spoken to a child is a spell, every image shown is a door, every story heard is a map. Where do those maps lead, to the deep self or to self-forgetting? That is the question we must ask ourselves, because in these times of confusion and darkness, whoever protects the child's soul protects the future of the world. Chapter 11. The Vibratory Protection of the Soul, the Inner Shield. Practical techniques for visualization, cleansing, aura sealing, and establishing mental fortresses. Every spiritual battle, every psychic territory, every assault by invisible forces finds its most vulnerable point in a soul that has forgotten its center. Yet at the same time, every human being carries within themselves an impenetrable sanctuary, a pure vibratory space prior to trauma, stronger than any projected mental form, more enduring than the darkest shadow. That core is not built, it is remembered. True protection is not imposed from outside, it is activated from within. This chapter has a clear purpose: to equip you with tools, not theories, not distant symbols, but techniques you can apply to strengthen what I call the inner shield, the vibratory armor of lucid consciousness. In my years working with the Society of the Inner Light, I have seen how even the best-intentioned souls fall, not from spiritual weakness, but from lack of basic energetic training, ignorance of vibration. And ignorance on subtle planes is an open door. Here then I share essential methods. Use them with respect. They are not mere exercises, they are magical acts, acts that reorganize subtle matter and the visualization of the pillar of light. The pillar of light visualization. Each morning before entering the world, sit in silence. Breathe deeply. Then imagine a beam of white and golden light descending from above, penetrating through the crown of your head, extending down into the earth, anchoring deeply. This beam is not fantasy. It is a vibratory reality that can be activated by focused will. Feel it travel down your spine, lighting each energy center like a torch, turning you into a living column between heaven and earth. Practice daily. This technique harmonizes the subtle body's electromagnetic field, aligns your thoughts, and repels dissonant mental forms. It is the first line of defense, aura sealing. Now imagine that same light expanding in all directions, forming a vibrant oval of crystalline energy around you. This oval is your aura. Many people have it damaged, pierced, or weakened by dense emotions, traumas, or environmental pollution. You are going to restore it. Visualize this light becoming a living dome like a softly pulsing golden egg. No dark form can penetrate it. No foreign emotion can cling to it. Your field is yours, sealed by your consciousness. Do this especially before sleep, entering dense public spaces, or engaging in emotionally charged conversations. Psychic larvae sweep. When you feel unexplained exhaustion, obsessive thoughts that don't seem your own, or sadness you don't understand, parasitic forms may be attached to your field. Fear not. There is cleansing. Visualize a rain of silvery violet light descending over you like a gentle but powerful torrent. This light drags, dissolves, and transmutes everything that does not correspond to your highest vibration. Support this with deep breaths and an internal mantra. Only the true remains. Repeat until relief is felt. Regularity is more powerful than occasional intensity. Mental fortress, the directed thought wall. Protecting the subtle body is not enough. The mind must also be trained not to open doors. Consider this. Every negative thought is like opening a window to the unwanted. Every obsession, an invitation. Therefore, build what I call the mental fortress. Visualize your mind as a white stone tower, imposing, silent, with a single door only you can open. Inside it, repeat clear, direct, strong affirmations. I am sovereign consciousness. My thought is my creation. Nothing enters without my permission. This trains the subconscious to reject vibratory invasion, even in states of fatigue or distraction. The flame of the heart, the fire impossible to corrupt. Finally, the center of every inner shield is the fire of the heart, not the physical organ, but the pure emotional core vibrating with love, certainty, and beauty. When this fire is lit, no shadow can survive nearby, because conscious love is not weakness. It is the highest vibration of the awakened soul. Activate it by recalling a scene of deep beauty, a memory of essential joy, a feeling of inner truth. Feel it burn in your chest, and when you do, project it. Let that flame envelop your field. That is the perfect shield. These techniques are not empty rituals, they are gateways, and if practiced consistently, you will awaken not only protection, but power. Because the soul that protects itself does not imprison. It remembers, it ascends, it becomes unbreakable. Do not fear the shadow, it always retreats before sustained light. Chapter 12. The Inner Temple as a Bastion of Resistance. Instructions to erect a psychic sanctuary on the inner plane. The power of the personal symbol, the secret mantra, and the invisible altar. Every fortress needs a center, and every invisible warrior needs a place from which to trace their silence. In the psychic war of the 20th century, fought not with swords but with symbols, not with gunfire but with suggestion. The true refuge is not physical, it is internal. That place is the inner temple. Here I do not mean a poetic image or a spiritual metaphor, but a real vibratory structure, a configuration of the etheric and mental field that every initiate must consciously build, stone by stone, symbol by symbol in the subtle world. It is there that the deepest identity is kept, where strength is gathered when everything outside seems to crumble, where the soul remembers that it is not an echo, but a source. In this chapter, I will reveal the technique for constructing that temple, not as taught in books or dogmas, but as passed in hushed tones within the inner circles of true esoteric tradition. What is presented here should not be shared with those who do not ask from the heart, for every temple raised opens a threshold, and every threshold needs a guardian and preparation. The silent place. Before building the temple, you must find in yourself the immovable axis. This is achieved through slow, rhythmic breathing, focusing attention on the space between the eyebrows. Close your eyes and silently repeat, "All that I am not, be silent." Repeat until the noise of thoughts lowers its volume. When you feel a vibration of gathering within, you have found the foundation. The first stone, the personal symbol. Every temple has a seal, and yours must contain your essential truth, not copied from another, not inherited, but remembered. Ask yourself, what symbol appears before you when you are in complete serenity? What shape or image has accompanied you since childhood, in dreams, visions, luminous obsessions? It might be a circle, a triangle, an eye, a letter, a flame. Do not choose it. Allow it to appear. Once revealed, trace it mentally over an empty etheric space as if drawing it with light at the center of an invisible chamber. This will be the seal that crowns your temple. No one else must know it. The etheric construction, the secret sanctuary. Now imagine a wide inner hall, perfect in symmetry. It may be circular, square, or octagonal. The walls are not stone, but vibratory substance. They may be made of white light, gold, shining obsidian, or pulsating crystal. You do not invent it, you discover it. Allow it to reveal itself. That is your temple. Visualize a solid floor, a protective dome, and a single entrance that only you can open. In this space, nothing penetrates without your permission. No foreign thought crosses its threshold. It is the inviolable chamber of the soul. There you will work, rest, and resist. The invisible altar, the immutable center. Every temple has an altar, not a physical one, but a vibratory altar where you place what is sacred to you. It might be a living flame, an open book, a chalice of light, a floating stone, or a flower that does not exist on earth. Place your personal symbol there, and alongside it a sealed word that only you will pronounce when you need to return. That altar is your point of power. From it you can issue decrees, send healing thoughts, receive inspiration, transmute pain. It is the source from which reality is rewritten. The secret mantra, the vibration that seals. Deep within the hidden work, each soul has a unique vibration, an internal sound that can awaken its true power. This mantra is not learned, it is received. It arrives as a syllable, a whisper, an echo in dreams. When you hear it, and you will know because it resembles no other sound, keep it. Do not speak it aloud before others. It is the key to your temple. Whenever you want to enter or feel threatened, repeat it silently. With it, all unwanted doors close. With it, the etheric structure is reinforced. With it, you return to yourself. The use of the temple not as retreat but as base of operations. The common mistake is to use the temple as an escape. Do not do this. This is not a passive refuge but a spiritual command center. From here you must visualize, create, protect, purify. You can work with images of the world, envelop loved ones in light, dissolve negative egregores, project elevated ideas. The temple is your field of operations in the invisible war. Maintenance. Care for the space as you care for the soul. Visit your temple daily, even if only for a few minutes. Reinforce the walls with intention. Renew the altar flame. Mentally cleanse the space. If any foreign presence has slipped in, detect it and expel it without fear. You are sovereign here, no one else. This inner sanctuary will not be destroyed by bombs nor invaded by ideologies. It does not depend on physical temples or external authorizations. It is yours, eternal, inviolable. And when everything around you trembles, when symbols become corrupted, when the world loses its voice, your temple will speak, and its voice will be that of your soul. Chapter 13. Thought as a sword, the direction of the will. How concentrated thought can cut harmful currents. The silent decree as a weapon. In the invisible war of our era, where what kills is not always what is seen, but what is thought, what is believed, what is felt without knowing why, thought is both a door and a sword. Those who do not know how to think are wounded by others' thoughts. Those who learn to think with direction and will become invulnerable. I have said in other writings that thought is a subtle substance, a higher-level magical energy that projects, expands, and adheres. It is not mere brain activity, nor a spark without consequence. Every sustained thought has form, weight, and direction, and when guided by a trained will, it becomes a luminous blade that cuts currents of shadow, dissolves parasitic forms, and reconstructs the vibratory order of the environment. This chapter deals with the art of thinking as a magical act, not as mental repetition, not as distraction, but as a technique of energetic direction. And the first thing you must understand is that thought without will is like a dull knife. It does not penetrate. The mind of the masses is weak because it thinks without focus. It jumps, it ruminates, it scatters. That is why it easily expresses invasive mental forms. But you will not be the mass. You will be the sword. Think with form, the image as the core. Every effective thought is born from a clear image, not from a loose word or a vague desire. Visualize exactly what you want to affirm. A flame that cleanses, a barrier that protects, an entity that dissolves, a situation that is ordered. Do not think of protection as an abstract concept. Think of a living wall of light. Do not think of health as a wish. Visualize the body vibrating in its perfect form. The clear image is the mold. The repeated thought is the substance. The firm emotion is the fire that shapes it. 2. Thinking with direction, the ray of intention. Once the image is clear, you must project it as if it were a ray. Imagine it emerging from your brow or from your heart and piercing the space to the desired point. That ray is not imagination. It is directed energy. And if sustained, it acts. Here the key is not overwhelming emotional force, but precision. It is not about shouting in the mind, it is about affirming with certainty. A thought projected with certainty cuts deeper than 1,000 anxious thoughts. 3. The silent decree, the inner word as a solar sword. Beyond the image, there is a tool even sharper, the silent decree. It is a brief, clear, powerful phrase that expresses a vibratory truth. Examples. Nothing penetrates without my permission. I am light and nothing else acts here. I cut all shadow with the sword of the One. The false dissolves and the real remains. These decrees are not emotional affirmations, they are magical commands and must be pronounced in the mind with firmness, with an internal tone of authority, without doubt, without hesitation. A mind that decrees with certainty rearranges the field where it stands. In cases of psychic attack, confusion, unexplained pain, the internal decree is the fastest sword. It does not need to be spoken aloud. The invisible plane responds to intention, and the enemy does not need to hear your voice. It is enough that they sense you have remembered your power. 4. Cutting harmful currents, intervention technique. When you perceive a dense current, an emotion that is not yours, a repetitive and dark thought, an external influence, do the following. 1. Stop the flow. Close your eyes, breathe deeply 3 times. 2. Visualize your personal symbol as described in the previous chapter. 3. Project from it a ray of light sharp as a sword that cuts through the scene or thought. Visualize how that ray gently but firmly cuts every tie, every image, every thread that does not belong to you. 4. Decree calmly, this does not belong to me. I return it to its origin without judgment. I remain in my center. 5. Breathe and feel the release. If you have done it with real will, the vibration will change instantly. 5. The sword does not attack, it dissolves. It is essential to remember that directed thought must not become a weapon of aggression. If used to harm, its edge reverses and wounds its wielder. Magical thought must be just, clear, necessary, and pure. It does not arise from resentment. It does not arise from desire for domination. It arises from the recognition of a higher truth that must be restored. The initiate does not fight people, egos, or entities with hatred. They cut illusions with lucid love, and their thought does not destroy. It restores lost order. The trained mind is the most refined tool in the universe, and when thought becomes a sword, will becomes law. Do not seek revenge with your mind. Do not think with fear. Think with light. Think as one who remembers that the soul is not made to flee, but to create. Chapter 14. The Web of Light, the Hidden Brotherhood of the Watchers. The existence of esoteric groups working together on subtle planes. How to synchronize with humanity's spiritual defense network. I've already spoken about attacks, about the symbols that fill us, about dense currents seeking to invade the soul. But now I must reveal to you the other half of the field, the living web of light, woven not by chance but by the conscious action of silent brotherhoods that have operated throughout time and continue to work as you read these lines. Across time, beyond borders and creeds, awakened souls have recognized each other without the need for physical contact or exchanging names. They recognize each other by vibration, by gaze, by affinity of purpose. These souls seek no prominence nor visible hierarchies. They are the watchers, custodians of the world's vibratory balance. They are found among mystics without religion, scientists with pure intuition, artists who channel the ineffable, elders who guard the invisible fire, children who remember what has not yet been taught to them. They do not form a single order nor answer to one name, but they are united by a secret axis, conscious love, lucid will, and light. That axis manifests as an etheric network, as real as any telegraph but vibrant, multidimensional, and organized from higher planes. What is the web of light? The web of light is not a spiritual metaphor. It is a planetary energetic structure composed of points of awakened consciousness vibrating at a specific frequency. Silent integrity, impersonal service, clarity without dogma, power without imposition. Every being who reaches this frequency, even if living alone on a mountain, even if never knowing another initiate in their life, is automatically connected, not by human decision, but by universal resonance. This network sustains humanity's vibratory field, preventing moral collapse from becoming absolute. It contains the uncontrolled expansion of shadow forces. It acts as a containment net, but also as a channel of inspiration for those who doubt, stumble, or are about to fall. 2. How do the Watchers work? The Watchers do not gather in visible temples. Their work is inner, silent, and ceaseless. Many meditate at the same hours without ever having met. Others receive similar messages in different languages. Some awaken in the middle of the night with an inexplicable urgency, and upon entering prayer, connect with an invisible circle already waiting for them. There is no hierarchy, but there is order, no liturgy, but internal ritual, no leaders, but centers of stronger irradiation located at closed points on the planet. Glastonbury, the Himalayas, Luxor, Cusco, Montserrat, among others. At certain moments of great crisis, wars, catastrophes, or collective falls of faith, these watchers receive an internal activation, a voiceless call, a vibration in the heart, and from wherever they are, they work, visualize, channel, decree, sustain, and although it may seem that nothing happens outside, they prevent the irreversible. 3. How to synchronize with the network. You can also connect. In fact, if these words resonate deeply within your being, it is very likely that you are already partially linked. What remains is your conscious decision, and that decision is not taken with an oath or a title. It is taken like this. 1. Every night before sleeping, enter silence. Bring your attention to your heart. Visualize a point of white light. Repeat internally, I offer my consciousness to the service of the light. Place me where I am most useful, according to the will of the One. 2. 1. Do not expect immediate answers. Do not imagine dramatic visions. Trust. The connection does not activate by emotion, but by sustained vibration. 3. Begin to practice daily directed thought, the care of your energetic field, the right word, the powerful silence. All this awakens you, makes you visible in the network. 4. One day, without knowing how, an image you did not ask for will come to you. You will know a truth you did not study. You will act with a strength that is not your own. That will be the sign. The network has received you. 4. Warning. Pride breaks the thread. Once connected, you must remember, the network is not a privilege. It is a call. And whoever begins to believe themselves special, to feel chosen, breaks the subtle thread of connection. Because the network is clear as crystal but fragile as breath, and it only vibrates in humility. Humility that does not crawl but recognizes each soul's place in the symphony of the One. 5. The network as refuge and strength. During psychic attacks, moments of confusion, or great decisions, you can invoke the network, not as persons, but as the collective vibration that lives beyond time. Close your eyes and repeat. May the network remind me, may I remember the network, may the One act. You will feel a calm that is not yours, a light that is not yours but belongs to you, and you will know you are not alone. You never were. Chapter 15, The Last Portal. When the physical plane collapses before the psychic, a prophecy of the time when material reality becomes porous. Visions of the future and the role of the initiate in the world's reconfiguration. For decades I have studied the subtle planes. I have observed how matter, far from being an unbreakable solid, is barely the condensed expression of subtler, older, and more truthful states. And I have seen with growing clarity that we are approaching an hour when that veil, once thick and slow, will begin to become transparent. The physical plane will give way not by destruction, but by transformation. This is the last portal, the stage in which material reality, what we call the world, what we consider safe and measurable, begins to dissolve under the vibratory pressure of the psychic plane. And when that happens, the world will no longer be read with the eyes, but felt with the soul, the porosity of the world, the dissolution of closed form. In my deepest visions, I have contemplated entire cities floating between the dense and the subtle. I have seen walls that dissolve at the passage of thought, roofs that become mirrors of the soul, streets traversed not by feet but by pure intention. This is not fantasy, it is a vibratory prophecy, a law already beginning to act in this era. The limits of the physical plane are no longer stable. Events without visible cause multiply. Spontaneous healings, impossible synchronicities, sudden awakenings, silent communications, collective thoughts shaping physical outcomes. All this indicates that the physical world is no longer a shield, but a membrane. And when that membrane becomes transparent, every human being will live exactly what they vibrate. No more masks, no more separation between what is secretly believed and what is shown on the surface. Thought will be form, desire will be substance, the soul will be its own environment. 2. The breaking of linear time. With the collapse of physical density, time as a single sequence will also collapse. We will begin to live in multiple simultaneous layers, memories activating like landscapes, possible futures filtering into the present, intuitions becoming real paths. Planes will mix, dreams will become doors, decisions magical seals. This process will not be comfortable for all. Those who have not purified their mental and emotional fields will live in a state of persistent delirium. They will lose sense of reality, confuse vision with hallucination, become lost among projections and spectres of their own shadow. That is why the initiate's work is urgent. 3. The role of the initiate, architect of the new fabric. When the world becomes porous, only those who have built their inner temple will be able to hold steady. They will be like lighthouses in a landless sea. They will have no power over others, but power over their own vibration. And that will be all that matters. The initiate will be called to perform 3 tasks. 1. Anchor. Be present amid chaos without losing their center. Be vibratory ground where others can remember their form. 2. Translate. Help the untrained understand what is happening, not by imposing dogmas, but by revealing symbols, decoding new realities as one interprets an ancient language. 3. Weave. Create new structures, schools, circles, relationships, vibrational communities, all from consciousness, not physical structure, because the new world will not be built with stone, but with coherent intention. 4. The falsification of the portal, the risk of sublime deception. Before the true portal fully opens, regressive forces will try to imitate it. They will simulate illumination, offer mental paradises, sell false ascensions, and many will fall because they cannot distinguish true fire from will-o'-the-wisps. The true portal does not open with promises, but with inner nakedness. It is not crossed with desire, but with formless surrender. It is not reached by external merit, but by resonance with truth. The initiate will know. They will feel that the portal does not lead outward but inward, and from within, everything is reconfigured. 5. The new world, not a utopia but a transparency. The collapse of the physical plane before the psychic is neither punishment nor blessing. It is simply vibratory justice. It is the end of simulation. It is the return to the law of the One. The world will not divide between the chosen and the condemned. It will divide between those who remembered who they are and those who chose to keep forgetting. And you, reader of these lines, are among those called to remember, not to save the world, but to support its transition to what it truly is. Do not fear the collapse, fear forgetting. And if you must choose only one thing from now on, let it be this: maintain your true vibration, even if everything else crumbles, because at the end of the portal, there is no other reality but you, and what you sustain will be what is reborn. Amen.